So we're on Daf Ayin. We went till about 10 lines down. The Mishnah had spoken earlier about Eved Kanani, that he's considered a apostle if he had relations with a woman, so she becomes apostle for Truma, apostle for Kuna, also a mamzer. The Mishnah said a difference between a Eved and a mamzer, that Eved is not considered related. Is that good? Much? Just how do we do this? That's good. Right, Ayin 78. So the Mishnah said that an Eved is not considered a child. So as far as the case would be a grandchild, that a Bas Kohen who married a Yisrael is held back from eating Truma as long as she has descendants, not only children, even grandchildren. But an Eved, if she has a grandchild who's an Eved, it's not going to be considered her descendants, and she's not held back from eating Truma. And the opposite, a Bas Yisrael married a Kohen, as long as there are descendants, she would be able to eat Truma, even though the descendant is not a Kohen. It could be a grandchild who's not a Kohen. But if the grandchild is an Eved, it's not considered a grandchild. It doesn't help her to eat Truma. And a Mamzer is considered a child, and therefore, as far as both cases, if the Mamzer is the grandchild who's going to help her to eat Truma, or the Mamzer is a grandchild who's going to stop her from eating Truma, that's the Mishnah Chiluk between an Eved and a Mamzer. So now the Gemara continues to bring the psukim, the source for that. Eved post al mishambiyah, that the Gemara is not going on. It's going on the etc. Eved doesn't pastel in is not considered. How does the words of the Mishnah before? I forgot the words. Just to see what it said. That the Eved post al mishambiyah, then post al mishum zera. He's not considered zera. So that's what the Gemara is going on. Those words, he's not considered a child. So that's what the Gemara is going on. My time, he shall be allowed that. He allowed to know that Eved, there's talking about an Eved Ivri, that he is given a Shifcha Kananis in order to have children. So those children don't belong to the Eved. They're not considered his children. From there you see, the same way that Eved Ivri, that has a child who's an Eved Kanani, is not considered his child. So too, anybody, any kind of child that biologically is considered, came into the family, and Eved Kanani is not considered a child. And the contrast, Mamzer Apostle Marchal, that the Mamzer is considered a child, and here comes out a Chiddush that even though he's puzzled, even though he's not a kosher child, he's a Mamzer. And it goes both ways, as we said, if the Bas Kohen married a Yisrael, and there's a descendant who's a Mamzer, he's still considered a descendant, and that's going to stop her from eating Truma, and the opposite also. And the Gemara brings a pasuk for that, Tanur Rabbanan V'Zera Einla. That talks about when she goes back to eat from her father's house. That's only if she doesn't have children. What's considered children? Ainli Allah Zara. Zera Zara Yinayim. First of all, it talks about how do you know grandchildren, maybe only children. How do you know that even if the children die, then only the grandchildren is still considered that she has descendants? The pasuk doesn't. The Gemara seems to say at this point you need a pasuk for that. We'll see in a second that you don't need a pasuk. That descendants are also considered children as far as this Allah of Truma. Only know if they're kosher children, but non-kosher like a mamzer, how do you know that's considered children as far as the din of Truma? I think that the Gemara's drush is because Ein and Ayin, even though one is an aleph, one is an Ayin, but we're interchangeable, and Ayin Allah would mean look around, like look whatever they have. As long as you find something, that's also considered zera. So you see from here that even a zera apostle, even a mamzer is considered a descendant as far as this halacha. But the Mars Akash, we used it a second ago. We had it for two drushes. One was to say even grandchildren. Now you want to allow it another drusha, even if they're not kosher children. How do you have two drushes from the same pasuk? You already used it for grandchildren. The Gemara says no, we didn't mean that. Zera zara, you don't need a pasuk for the halacha that grandchildren are considered children. Grandchildren are like children. The Gemara before a couple of pages ago, it says here, Samach Veis, the Gemara said that drusha for that. Over there, Rashi said that for son's sons, you don't need a pasuk, but for a daughter's son, the Gemara brought a pasuk about Yehuda Mechokiki, that really Yehuda descendants was from Menashe, that there's a daughter over there, Ben Machir. So there, the Gemara brought in the Samach Beis, the Gemara brought a pasuk to show that grandchildren are children, and therefore the pasuk over here is only necessary for the other drasha. So our pasuk of Ayin Allah, this is only necessary to say that even non-kosher children, like a mamzer, also will be considered children as far as this halacha of Truma. So that's finished. We finished this halacha that Eved is not considered a descendant. They're not considered related, even though they're biologically connected. That's not considered a relationship. And a mamzer is considered related. The Mishnah had mentioned in passing that a case of mamzer would be an Eved or goy that had relations with a Jewish woman, that the child is Jewish because has a Jewish mother, but it said that he's a mamzer. We don't pass like that. We pass that the child is kosher, that Eved the goy well basis well of not kosher. But the Gemara is going, the Mishnah seems to be going according to the one that says it's a mamzer. And the Gemara thinks that it's talui in this issue about chayve lavin, that the goy in the Eved is a chayve lavin. Rashi brings down the lavin lo sus chatein bam, or by Eved it says lo siya kadesha, lo yeh kadesh. So there's a lav. So the Gemara thought that this halacha, if the child born from a goy or an Eved is a mamzer or not, depends on this general machlokas about chayve lavin. If the union was also by a negative commandment, is that enough to make a mamzer? If the Mishnah says that the son born from a goy or from a eved is a mamzer, it only goes according to Rabbi Kiva. That says that with daf ayin number 78. That it comes out, it's mashma that we're going according to Rabbi Kiva that chayve lavin produces a mamzer, but we don't like that. We hold that chayve krisos makes a mamzer, but the chayve lavin not. The Gemara says it's not dependent on that. I feel the same Rabbanan, even according to Rabbanan that says chayve lavin in general don't create a mamzer. The goy ve'eved modu, that's an exception. The chiyas Rav Dimi Yom Rav Yitzchak Rav Dimi Mishum Rabbeinu goy ve'eved Rabba Bas Yisrael blood mamzer, and over there seems to not to be. The Gemara doesn't mean the drasha down, but that seems to be independent, even if you don't hold that chayve lavin would make a mamzer. But even Rebbe, you're going Mishum Rabbeinu, Rebbe, and over there doesn't. The Gemara over there says he does not hold like Rabbi Kiva as far as chayve lavin, but still he holds that a goy and an eved do produce a mamzer. And just again, we don't pass like that. We pass that the goy and eved above by Yisrael blood kosher. He's Jewish and he's not a mamzer. So I don't know how to juggle everything, but we don't pass like this point. We hold that the child is not a mamzer. The Mishnah ended off just with the irony that you can have a grandchild who's a mamzer, and he is helping his grandmother to eat truma.
And the opposite.
And the opposite, that she could have a grandchild who's a kohen gadol, and she's stopping him from eating. She's stopping him. She's stopping her. What was the case? A bas kohen that married Yisrael, as long as they are descendants, even if the husband died and the children died, as long as there's a grandchild, that they're still considered connected to the family, and she wouldn't be able to eat truma. So this bas kohen that married Yisrael, they had a child, a daughter who married a kohen, and the grandchild is a kohen, and it became a kohen gadol. He's stopping his grandmother from eating truma because she's still connected to the family of her husband, who's the Yisrael. Here you have the irony. A woman could have a grandchild who's a mamzer, who's helping her to eat truma, and she could have a grandchild who's a kohen gadol who's stopping her from eating truma. So besides the irony that Mishnah brought down, it also brings down a brisa that makes it even more, it stresses it even more. Tanu Rabbanan, Harini kafaras ben biti kuza shemachileni betruma, ve'ini kafaras ben biti kada sheposlani ben truma. There's a kuza and a kada. A kuza is a cup, and a kada is a pitcher. So the expression that the Mishnah is using, the Brisa is using, is like not a chashuva one, like the mamzer, like somebody small, and then you have the kada, the pitcher, the big kohen gadol, and there's an expression called Harini kaparas. That means that it says by a father, when a father or mother nifter, so the son says Harini kaparas mishkavo. That I think it says by a father, but probably by a mother also. That Harini kaparas mishkavo, that the son, after within 12 months of the father's death. So he says, when he mentions his name, not just says blessed memory, he says that I should be a kapara that he needs. If he needs any kapara, if he needs an atonement, so the punishment should come upon me instead of him. And the person says that on his father. It says also about a Rebbe, by any kapara, it says that also. So here, this expression doesn't have to be halachic, but it says that, like I take on the atonement, it should be my problem. That's when someone is praising somebody or marich somebody, give them a lot of covered. So here there'd be a woman who would say that I would be the kapara for my grandson, who's a little cup, who's giving me like a little cup in a pitcher. He's a little cup, he's a little one that's giving me truma, but I'm not going to be kapara's ben biti, who's a big cod, who's stopping me from eating truma. So again, it's just the expression to show the difference, how it could be a grandmother who takes pride in her grandchild who's really not a chashuv guy, but he's helping her. And sometimes she could have a chashuv grandson who's causing her problems. I don't know an application of this, but that's the yesod that the Brisa seems to express.
Why the kohen gadol is passing her?
A woman married a bas kohen, married a Yisrael. She cannot eat truma because she a marriage, right? and she had a son from that Yisrael, even if the husband will die, she's still cannot eat truma. And if she has a grandson from that next generation, even though the children died, she still cannot eat truma because she has children. She married Israel and she has descendants from that marriage, no matter what the descendant is. It could be the descendant is a Kohen Gadol. This woman who married Israel could have a daughter who married a Kohen, whose son is a Kohen and became a Kohen Gadol. So you can have a woman whose husband had been a Israel and she has descendants from him, even though the husband died, the child died, there's a grandson, and the grandson might be a Kohen Gadol, and he's holding her back from eating truma because she's still connected to her original husband, who was a Yisrael. So there you have a woman's grandson who's a Kohen Gadol is stopping her from eating truma. That's good?
Why is the second generation allowing you to eat?
Not allowing her.
So neither one is allowing you. Not
Right,
the
but the
guy,
son-
not
but-
the- not the
Yes, but there's no case where a woman's going to have a son who's a Kohen Gadol and not eating truma. The Kohen Gadol will help her eat truma. But the case is that she married Israel, and the son is the son, and the daughter is Israel, and that one is going to. And she's not. As long as she's alive, she's also stopping the mother from eating truma. But even if she died, the grandson would stop her from eating truma. If she has no descendants, and then she goes back to her father's house and she eats truma. But if she has a descendant, it will be a son. So
doesn't help.
the son would be a Yisrael. Also, he would stop her from eating truma, and they wouldn't get a Kohen. Right. The only way to get a Kohen, they have to get a Kohen someplace over there. Right. Okay. Good. Next parak. This next parak is a famous parak all about Mila, all about circumcision. What's it doing in the middle of Yevamos? I don't know. The Mishnah starts. An orel, a person who's uncircumcised, and anybody that's tamei, orel or tamei, they're not allowed to eat truma. He's a Kohen who didn't have a circumcision.
It's the eighth parak, and that's the eighth day is when we have a bris milah.
Okay,
So
probably.
they just, let's put it in right here. It's the eighth parak.
There must be another reason also.
What's the question? What's the question?
Why is the parak? What's the parak doing here? It's not about Yevamos. It's not about Yibam over here.
How do you think if we have the last part about Aaron?
A little bit. So it's like a big tangent. I'm not sure. Maybe it's spoken about. I didn't look around.
Okay.
So a Kohen who's an Orel, he wasn't circumcised. He cannot eat truma. Even though a Kohen can eat truma, there's a new din that an Orel is not allowed to eat truma. Where does it say so? It doesn't say in the pasuk. So we're gonna have a whole drasha about that. Two drashas, well, a long Gemara, what the source of this halacha is. But a Kohen is not circumcised, he cannot eat truma. Also a tamei, that it does say openly that a tamei person cannot eat truma. So if the Kohen is tamei, as long as he's tamei, that's how it can be temporary.
Also the Pesach, right?
Pesach also, yeah, over there it says openly that the Orel Yochel, but the truma doesn't say.
Yeah, isn't it the oil itself is considered something
No,
kind of tuna? It's not a kind of
no,
tuna.
also not. There is maybe something's reminding you that it says a parishmana orla to parishmana kever, but that's poetic and it doesn't mean it doesn't have anything to do with al stomach. So orel and a kol lo yochlu b'truma, and orel is not allowed to eat truma. A tam is not allowed to eat truma, but that's not a reason why their miknas kaspo shouldn't eat truma. Neshein v'avdein yochlu b'truma. The kohen who's the orel or a tamei, he may give his wife to eat truma. Means miknas kaspo also the avodim that he acquired a wife, he acquired avodim. They're allowed to eat truma, and even though he's not allowed to eat truma, that doesn't stop them from eating truma. Before the Gemara said it also eloquently that his mouth hurts him. That means that there's a technicality why he can't eat truma, but really he's a kohen. He's a kohen who's allowed to have truma inherently. He has a problem. He has a toothache. He has a mouth ache. He's an oral. He's a tamei. That's considered a technicality.
You can benefit from it.
He can benefit from it, and also he's allowed to give to eat to
That's
his
a benefit.
wife.
That's a
Miknas
benefit.
kaspo.
You
Yeah,
can
but
feed
not
his
the
family.
benefit. Yeah, but it's more than benefiting. It means that he has the power. He empowers his miknas kaspo to be able to eat truma. Not only that he's not. It's not the point. Is not that he's benefiting from truma. The point is that he has the ability to give them the permission to eat truma. Yisrael cannot eat truma. They're non-Kohen. They're non-Kohen. It's only miknas kaspo that can eat truma. So it's miknas kaspo. He's a Kohen.
Or you're saying that what I'm trying to say in terms of benefit, a Yisrael also could benefit from truma.
We could
So
talk
you
about.
could
We
sell
could,
it
we could talk about
at a
that.
lower
Yeah.
price.
Okay.
So
But
you're
that's
saying
not the
it's more
point.
than that,
The point
that
is that
he
he
has the
empowers
power
them to
To
eat
feed
truma.
it to his family.
Right. Otherwise, they wouldn't be allowed to eat truma. They're Israelim, but they could eat truma because they're their own. They're acquired by the Kohen. It's a side point
He's a
of
Cohen.
because he's a Kohen. Even though he's a Kohen, he's not allowed to eat truma. That doesn't make a difference. There's a point of where Rashi says that this Oriel, why did he not circumcise? A Jew didn't circumcise. So Rashi says that he wasn't allowed to because in the family it's a medical problem that there were already two sons already, two brothers that had died. So they're not supposed to circumcise because it looks like it's dangerous. So even though he goes through his life as an honest, he's no choice. No, he can't. He's a big tzaddik, but he's not allowed to circumcise. Still, he's not allowed to eat.
You said that Hazak was 3.
So that be here we pass in 2 because the
Here we pass
machlok is 2 and 3, and we are machmer that even two, the third one's not supposed to be nimo. Taisvis, there's a Taisvis also agrees over here. There is a Taisvis Sishanim over here, brings down a the time that argues, and say where's it over here? He says, Rashi is the one who always says it. Rashi sticks this in that the oil means that he wasn't able to because his brothers died. But Taisus argues, Taisus Shishanim argues the time that says it's not a mitzvah to circumcise, and he's considered an honest, and it's no mitzvah.
Is this on our daf?
On our daf is Taisus Shishanim.
Oh, right at the beginning, all right.
And he argues and he says that Lachain, where is that? Lachain Pirsha Ben Tam, the Oral Salam and Meshum and that he's doing it as an Avera. No reason why he shouldn't. If he wouldn't be able to, then the Tam says they wouldn't be considered an Oral. He'd be allowed to eat truma, even it sounds like, according to Tosfos. But that's a big sugya. I don't know who we passed him like, but there's machlokas Rishonim over here.
So you're saying in the Mishnah that it's willfully.
The Mishnah does says oral. It doesn't say what. It doesn't say why. Why didn't he circumcise? Rashi says even an honest, even if it's not his fault. And Tosfos says, Rabbeinu Tam says only if it's willingly not circumcising. Willingly means that he says because he's scared, it's painful. It's we understand them, but it's not an excuse. It doesn't make him into an honest. But according to Tosfos, if he would be honest because he's not allowed to, the Rav said you may not because it's dangerous. So then Tosfos says he wouldn't be considered an oral as far as his halachas. It's like before 7 days, which the Gemara is going to talk about. The Rishonim I saw talk a lot about the sugya. What it is, but everyone always knows Rashi, but it's not so simple. Rashi says that even if he's not circumcising because he may not, also he's considered uncircumcised, and it's not so simple. Machlokas about it. Okay, that was the first halacha about the oral and tamei that they're not allowed to eat truma, but they may empower their miknas kaspo to eat truma. The next halacha talks about a petzua dak and a krish shafcha means that there's damaged organs. A man has his male organ is damaged, so the halacha is that he's not allowed to have relations with a woman, with a Jewish woman, with a kosher woman. Maybe it says le'yava b'kal Hashem, le'yava psudaka of krish shafcha b'kal Hashem. The Gemara is going to talk about these points, what they are. The daka seems to be in testicles, is that the damaged testicals or the damaged organ. The word shofcha literally would sound like the organ, the fact that it pours out, it spills, it ejects, ejaculation. And krush shofcha means that it's cut, a cut organ. So psua daka would mean crushed testicles, and krush shofcha would mean a cut organ. So they're not allowed to have relations with their wives anymore. If they weren't allowed to marry in the first place. And if they did, they wouldn't be allowed to have relations anymore. So, and is there any reason why he cannot eat truma? He could eat truma. He's a Kohen. He could eat truma. And also he could have ownership of a slave. And that's miknas kaspo. They also could eat truma. So hein vavdei nochlu. He, the Kohen, who's a krish shofcha, he could eat truma, and so too his slaves could because miknas kaspo. But nishem lo yochlu. But the wives may not. Why? Because if they did have relations, if they did continue to have relations, so he made her puzzle because it was a bia psula. The fact that it's a losase to have relations, if they did, so he made her. I think it would be called a zona. I think that would be the Rashi calls it a halala before it be a zona because it's not Isurei Kahuna, it's a Isurei Kohol. So she'd be puzzled now she cannot eat truma. If they were married and he didn't have relations with her from the time that he became puzzled, so then she could eat because she's miknas kaspo. Means there's no in the miknas kaspo. It's true she's miknas kaspo, but if she has a psul because she became puzzled because they had an illicit, whatever the word would be, of relationship, that they had relations even after he became a kushafcha, that would puzzle her.
I'm sorry, I didn't get it. Who didn't know what?
No. The word yada is a term for having relations. That's called relations. If he didn't have relations with her,
Mishnah said,
from the time that he became a psua daka, he did not have relations with his wife.
Then it's okay for her to eat.
Right, because she didn't become puzzled. She belongs to him, that she's acquired. That's okay. The problem is that if they had relations, she became puzzled because that was a surah. That was a prohibited relationship, prohibited union. The fact that they had relations after he became a kushafah. So that's the Mishnah. See, on
When
one
it
hand,
says Elu, it means who? Yeah,
Elu means the wife, You're right.
Why
You're right, good. I don't
Any
know.
wives?
I didn't notice that. In the Shehan, their wives. It talks about them in general. People in this situation who have wives.
Yeah.
So that's the Mishnah really is finished. We have still more, but the main part of the Mishnah is over. You can have people that they
Isn't it the wife and the Nebeto? And the wife and her children? Isn't that why it's Elu?
no, it has nothing to do with the children. It's only that she became puzzle. She was what do you mean the children? Children are allowed to eat because they're Kohanim. That's not a chiddush. And the daughters are Kohanis. They're allowed to eat because of that. And that doesn't affect if he's a Kushafra, that they don't get affected at all. Same way Avadim don't get affected.
He probably doesn't have children, right? He can't have
From now, but he could have children from before. They're allowed to continue eating truma.
Uh-huh.
And slaves he could buy now also they're allowed to eat truma.
Yeah.
But he has no problem. It's not eating truma. He's not eating truma, even though he's a Kushafra. But his wife has the issue now that they can't have relations. If they do, she becomes puzzle because they had a prohibited union. So the first part of the mission said is a case where you can have Kohanim that may not eat truma, but they could give their wives and Avadim truma. And another case you could have that they and the Avadim are allowed to eat truma, but the wives may not eat truma if they had relations and they puzzle them. The rest of the Mishnah goes on to say the Allah is about a kush shafra and a psua daka, bezel psua daka, called shnif psua beitzim shalom. What is a psua daka? A crushed testicles. A few achas man, even one testicle also makes him a kush shafra, also makes him a psua daka, even though the other testicle is still intact. And what's a kush shafra? Called shnichos agid, that the organ was cut. If something is left of the corona is the top part of the organ, the top place where it starts getting narrower towards the tip. So that part does not, even if that part is cut, it does not make him into a kushafra, even only if past that. And even if there's a mashu, kotasara, even the hair's breadth of the corona, that's enough to make him not considered a kushafra. It's only if the organ itself and the tip is not considered the organ.
Yeah, so it says, in a sense, it's sort of like the opposite of a oral. The oral is nothing is cut, but here the whole corona is cut.
Okay, maybe there is, but I don't know. I don't see it. Okay, so that's right. The word corona means a crown, right? So that's how much the word a Torah. Here it is, a Torah. There are many words in the Chazal. I noticed that when they want to describe the parts of the body, it uses certain mashal, a mashal like over there, the crown.
Yeah.
And it's also the goyim in describing the body. They use the same words. Means Chazal use, and they got the same thing. They're talking the same language. It's probably a medical term that the whole world used, and the Chazal use it also. There are other parts of the body also that the Gemara has certain labels, and we could probably you learn from how it's used in the world that's what Chazal meant. They didn't invent the word. They used the same expression that the Goyim used also. Here, the word Torah, there is a machlokes b'shanim what a Torah means. So I just would think maybe we could learn it from the corona, because corona also means a crown. That's what the word is. So I think it's the same thing. As far as the halachas, more or less, of course, as every time the Gemara is Rosh, there's also a lot of halachas come in also, by the way, we got a lot of extra credit. But the halacha we finished already, that oral is not allowed to eat truma, and today's daf is going to be the source. Where do you get that from? What's the drasha to learn that out from? It doesn't say openly in the pasuk. So there's going to be a lot of Gemara, but it's all under this title that oral is not allowed to eat truma, and the question is, where do you get it from? So we have a brisa, Tanya Amar Abelazar, Minayin la'oral she'ein ochel b'truma, Nemar tosha v'socha b'pesach, v'nemar tosha v'socha b'truma, ma tosha v'socha omer b'pesach oral asur bo, av tosha v'socha omer b'truma oral asur bo. So Rabbi Yaakov mentioned this before, that it says by Korban Pesach that an oral may not eat the Korban Pesach. That's true, but it doesn't say by truma. So how are we going to label this? Take this halacha of oral by Korban Pesach and move it on to truma? It doesn't say it over here. So Rabbi Lazar says it's Gzeir Shava. There's another thing that it says by Korban Pesach that a toshav v'sachir should not eat it.
But what is toshav?
What is a toshav and a sachir?
A toshav is someone who's a resident.
A resident, and a sachir means a hired worker. What does that have to do with anything? A resident. So the Gemara is going to, in this sugya at least, it seems to be talking about a Jew, and Rashi says that a toshav would mean that he's here to stay, which would mean Eved Ivri, who wanted to stay with his master even after 6 years, like it says in Parashat Mishpatim, if he wants to remain. So then they bear a hole in his ear, bore a hole in his ear, and then near it. What? That's it. Yes, that's what Tosha is mean. A permanent resident. He's here to stay. But it's not a ger. He's a Jew. He's an Eved Ivri that's sold for life. It doesn't mean life. It says ala yovel, but that's called the toshav. And a sachar is going to be a temporary worker, which means a 6-year event. That's what Rashi goes through the Gemara, that a toshav means a nirtza, someone who's here he's permanently here. He's an Eved Ivri. He's a Jewish, but
the pshat that it's a guy who lives in your country.
that also could be a pshat.
Oh,
That's also a possible
it's
pshat.
another-
But it seems that it wouldn't be a chiddush. Or we'll go through the Gemara like
Is
Rashi.
gonna eat Pesach?
Yeah, he can't eat the korban pesach. Tashavas achir lo yochal bo. Chaim Dov wants to say that's what the pasuk says, that even though he's a permanent resident, he can't eat the korban pesach. And a sachir, even though he's a hired worker by a Jew, you might think he could eat. No, he can't eat. That's Chaim Dov wants to. There's such a pshat in the pasuk like that. That's talking about a guy, and even though he's somehow connected to you, that's not enough to eat the korban pesach. Only if you own him, like Eved Kanani that you own, then you could. Then he could eat the korban pesach. But the Gemara seems to going over here. Let's see Rashi over here. The Gemara is going to say this later on, so we'll hold on. Here, can you know them? Rashi says Eved Ivri on Yirtza and Kinyan Shanim Islam Eved Yosef B'Shei Shanim. That's what Rashi seems to go through the pasuk. But anyway, we don't need to this at this point. We don't need to know the translation even. It says that a toshav v'sachir may not eat the korban pesach. It also says a pasuk in Parshas Emor that a toshav v'sachir may not eat truma. So now we have a gzer shava link. Once we have the same words over here, same words over there, we can make the link between the two halachas. Whatever applies by Pesach also applies to Truma. And since we know by Pesach it says that uncircumcised may not eat the korban Pesach, so also an uncircumcised may not eat Truma. Ma toshav v'sachar amar b'Pesach, an oral is not allowed to eat. So too toshav v'sachar that it says over here by Truma, also an oral may not eat. That's Rabbi Elazar's drasha. The question was, how do you know a source? What's the source that an oral uncircumcised is not allowed to eat Truma? A gzer shava from korban Pesach. That's the first drush.
That's the Gezer Shalom, sorry.
Toshav v'sachir. But by both places it says a toshav v'sachir may not eat. It says by korban Pesach in Parshas Bo, and it says in Parshas Emor by Truma that a toshav v'sachir may not eat Truma. Rabbi Kiva, this is the brayso continues. Rabbi Kiva has a different drasha, which we're not going to see today. We're going to see it tomorrow. Rabbi Kiva Omer, ein l'tzarech, you don't need your drasha. Rabbi Omer, ish the rabbos orel. Over there it's talking about tamei. Ish mizar aron v'hutz aru azav because the shim lo yachel. Others say that a tamei person who's coming cannot eat truma, which is open pasuk. But over there it says ish, and it's extra words to say ish. We could have said ish mizera aharon, or even there, maybe the whole thing is extra. We could have said zera aharon, and it says ish. That's coming by truma. By truma. It says ish. That's over there. It's about tamei. Kohen who's tamei may not eat truma, and it has extra word ish. Anybody from Mizera Aharon, from the children of Aaron that stomach cannot eat, and the rabbos oral to include oral also. So we have two drushes, either Gzer Shabbat from Pesach, or there's an extra pasuk that it says by a tamei eating truma. There's extra pasuk over there, ish to say even oral also may not.
That's the end of the brayso.
That's the end of the brayso, and there's a big period over there. And then we're going to go now with Rabbi Elazar. The rest of the day today is going to be Rabbi Elazar's drasha. Tomorrow we're going to talk about Rabbi Kiva's drasha. The whole page of today is going to be Rabbi Elazar. And again, the halacha is true. Everyone agrees to the halacha. The question is where the source is. And as always, we get more information as we go along to find out the drasha.
The first one is the Gezer Shava.
Right.
The second one is not a Gezer Shava because it's in the same pasuk. It's just
It's by
it's
truma.
2 words and you didn't need 2 words. It's an extra word.
Right.
It's not
And over there
like
it's talking
Gezer
about truma. It's talking about truma. To eat truma when the
About
Kohen is
eating truma,
tamei.
It has an extra word, so let's darshan that.
Right.
Okay.
It's not by it's by the subject of truma.
It's
But
not called
truma,
the Gezer Shava.
it's not called the Gzer Shavah, right? There's extra word. Amama, we have the master has said, means we just learned the brayso, and it's going to say over the brayso all over again. Abelaz Omer, Nema Tosha v'Sacha b'Pesach, Nema Tosha v'Sacha b'Truma, Ma Tosha v'Sacha Omer b'Pesach Or Lasabo, Av Tosha v'Sacha Omer b'Truma Or Lasabo. That's what do they call that? Copy and paste.
Yeah.
We held the brayso. We did the whole brayso. A quote, right? We quoted the whole brayso, the yellow part of the brayso at least, but plus the white. We just quoted all that. And now the brayso, there was a problem that it must be that there was extra. It means there are 2 levels of Gzer Shava, the strength of a Gzer Shava. How strong is the Gzer Shava? This drasha called the Gzer Shava, there's sometimes when it's mufna, sometimes when it's not mufna. The word mufna means that the words are extra. It's not necessary to say the word. So besides being an extra word, there's also a Gzer Shava link. But that's a strong Gzer Shava link if the words are extra. But if the words are not extra, even though there's a Gzer Shava, you could use it, but then it's very weak. And if you have any kasha, any difference between the 2 subjects, we'll knock it down. It means it's not strong enough to withstand the kasha. If there's no kashas,
Mufna means these are extra words in each place.
right, that you would
And
not
that's
need
the
it.
best
That's the best. It means extra words, and it's
here and
and
there.
there.
So we must.
that's called mufna mishnei tzaddim. That means that it's like the word is like vacant, mufna panui. That it's vacant. It's not unnecessary.
Panui, like available.
Right, it's available. Why is it available? Because it's empty. That means that it's not necessary. So if the Gemara says it must be that it's mufna, because if it's not, then there's problems with this comparison of korban pesach and truma. To say that truma is like korban pesach is much more stringent than truma. So just because Allah is there that oral may not eat korban pesach doesn't necessarily mean to learn also to truma. And if it's mufna, then it'll be a strong gezer shava. It'll withstand the kasha. But if not, it's gonna fall apart. So that's what they want. What's the word? Available. Vacant. Vacant is a better word. But vacant means that it's available. Available vacancy. You have vacancy. There's an apartment that's vacant, so it's available. So if there's a word that's vacant, it means that it doesn't have any drush, it wasn't taken up yet, it wasn't usable, it wasn't used, it wasn't utilized yet, then we're allowed to utilize this for a gzer shava. But if not, then it's a very weak gzer shava. Mufna, it must be mufna. With Sakasha, this is an attack. Dila mufna, if it's not going to be vacant and available, then the gzer shava is not strong. You can there's a kasha on this gzer shava. There's much more stringent. The carbon it's much more harder to eat a carbon than to eat truma because there's such a thing called pigul, no sir tummy. Pigul means, well, I won't go into the details now, but if the Kohen had thought that he's going to do the carbon in the wrong way, so then it becomes puzzle. That doesn't happen by truma. No sir, if it's left over time, so that the meat, the carbon becomes puzzle, and also as a keep carbon to eat it. And a tummy person also will bring a korban. That's what Rashi seems to say. That all these things, there's a chiv korban if he does this, and that doesn't apply to truma. So a korban is more severe than truma. So how could you learn out? It must be that it's mufna. And please go ahead to explain to me that it's mufna, as if to say mufna it must be mufna. If not, it must be available. If it's not, then it's not a good gezer shava. So the one answer is yes. Lie. The word lie, they say means be'emes and truth of nui mufna. It is available. It is vacant, because the word that it says toshav v'sachir are extra. You would have known the halacha without it saying, since it says it, so it's extra, and therefore you have a strong gezer shava. And the Gemara says, "Hey mufna, which one is extra?" Now we have two. One is truma, one is korban pesach. So first the Gemara says that truma, it is necessary to say if we wouldn't know it by ourselves. Either truma, mitzvah, tzrichi. Both of them are necessary to say. We wouldn't have known this halacha if you wouldn't have told us. The Tanya, toshav zekoni kinyan olam, sachir zekoni kinyan shanam. This is what Levi Yaakov wanted to know. What's a toshav? What's a sachir? So here it says toshav means someone who's permanently bought. Rashi says it means that he's Eved Ivri, that was bought by his master, means like a nirtza, that he wanted to continue to be an Eved Ivri even after the 6 years, and he had his ear bored, and that makes him to be avadola olam. The Gemara says it means only till Yovel. Of Eved Ivri. That's what Rashi learns the sugi Eved Ivri. He's a Jewish man, but he sold himself for an Eved.
Is this the one I love my wife and I love my children?
Yes. His wife is a shifcha. He shouldn't love her so much. He should go to get a Jewish wife. He got a shifcha kananis. He doesn't want to leave her.
After
he became an Eved Ivri. He was given a shifcha kananis, and he had children that don't belong to him.
And now he says, "I love her, and
I don't want to leave."
And so I don't want to be free.
So and he becomes, and this halacha. The question is if he's allowed to eat truma, means that he's the toshav, he's going to be the nirtza or the eved of a kohen. Is that acquisition that the kohen owns this eved ivri, is that enough to allow him to eat truma? So it says no.
It is a 6 year.
So it says either not, and even if he's a koni kinyan, even if he's a nirtza, nun reish sadikain, also cannot eat truma. Toshav is a koni kinyan olam, sachar is a kinyan shanim. So the question is, no, that's what I'm saying. That Kinyan Kaspo is allowed to eat. That means Eved Kanani that he bought. But this is not Eved Kanani. This is Eved Ivri that he's working for him for 6 years. He's working for him forever. But that's not allowed to eat truma. It has to be only if he's a Miklas Kaspo that he owns his body. That's Kinyan Kaspo, like by Eved Kanani. Eved Ivri is not like that.
But even though he paid money to have him as
but he doesn't. He only owns the work. He doesn't own the person. So Eved Kanani is allowed. Eved Kanani is allowed to eat the same way the animals of a Kohen is allowed to eat because he owns them. So too, Eved Kanani he owns them. But Eved Ivri is not called that he owns it, even though he's working for him 6 years, even eternally ad olam. V'yomar toshav al yomar sachir ba'ani omer kanu kinyan olam eno ochel kanu kinyan shanam lo kol shkein. The Bryce asks, it's not necessary to say both of them, which is a bigger chiddush, that even the one who's a kanu kinyan olam, he's the one who's forever a slave. So if he's not allowed to eat, even though his master is a Kohen, so surely if he's only bought for 6 years, so why is supposed to have to say both of them? Just say
Wait,
a
if he
toshav.
bought for 6 years.
What? If he's bought for
he
6
can't
years,
eat Pesach?
we're talking about truma.
We're talking about truma.
In the pasuk of truma,
When he's working for a Kohen, he can't eat truma.
right? And even if he's a nirtza to the Kohen, he also may not eat truma. That's a bigger chiddush, right?
If he's what?
He's a nirtza. He's a 50-year. He's till yovel.
Nirtza. Yeah.
He's forever.
Yeah.
So he's not allowed to eat truma, even though he's working
Yeah.
till yovel. So, which is a big chiddush that even the nirtza, even if he's the nirtza means the bored hole ear, bored ear. So that's a Bryce's kasha. Don't tell me toshav esachir. Just say a toshav. If a toshav is not allowed to eat, even though he's
It's
working
certainly
forever,
going forever.
certainly a 6-year man. Tani Omer, Kani Kinyan Olameno, also Kani Kinyan Shanam Lokolskin. If everlasting Eved is not allowed to eat truma of his master, the Kohen, surely if it's only a 6-year Eved. So the Gemara says you're right. In the theory, you're right, but we wouldn't even know that's the definition. When it says toshav, we don't know what a toshav means. Ilu Kena, Yisi Omer, toshav is Kani Kinyan Shanam. If they only would have said the word toshav, if they would have said openly that even if he's a everlasting Eved, he may not eat, then it's true. You don't have to say 6 years, surely not. But the word toshav doesn't explain all that. It's an ambiguous word. You might think that a toshav means a 6-year Eved. But if that would be the pshat, you would say, but if he's a everlasting Eved, so then he would, yes, be able to eat truma. I would have thought. So therefore, the pasuk says both toshav and sachir in order to make clear that a sachir is a 6-year Eved, and a toshav must mean an everlasting Eved. So all this was to explain that the pasuk that it says by truma toshav v'sachir is necessary. So what we started off saying that it's mufna, so far we didn't find it because the one by truma is not mufna. Like Yaakov mentioned before that you have to have both sides mufna. That the Gemara is going to say soon. But there is more value, it is more strength to at least one side is mufna. The Gemara is going to take it by stages. Do we find anything mufna? Is any one of them vacant and available? So first the Gemara says truma you do need. So truma is not vacant. So is anything vacant? Is Pesach vacant? Ella the Pesach. The Brisa, yes, that's under the Brisa. And this Brisa was brought to show that the toshav v'sachar that it says by truma is necessary. So it's not vacant. So what's the vacant? So we're up to 3 lines from the bottom. Ella the Pesach mufni. But the one of Pesach will say that's the one that is extra, and you could darshan it as a gzeir shava, strong gzeir shava. And the Gemara explains why it's extra because high toshav v'sachar the cause of Achman Pesach. Mind you, what is the case of toshav v'sachar we're talking about? We're talking about the way Rashi learns. We're talking about a Jewish Eved, either a 6-year Eved or a Nirtza, that's an everlasting Eved. And it's saying that he may not eat the Korban Pesach, which is going to be a question. Just because he's working for a Jew, he's not allowed to eat the Korban Pesach. The Pasuk says that the Toshav V'Sachir Eved is not allowed to eat the Korban Pesach. Does it make sense that talking about a Jew who's an Eved Ivri, he cannot eat Korban Pesach because he's working for somebody? It can't be. Makes sense. Yeah. Because he's a Toshav V'Sachir, he's part from Korban Pesach. So the words are difficult. The words of the Gemara say that after we know, the Gemara doesn't just ask the way I asked it. I asked it. He's Jewish. Of course, he should eat. Of course, he should do the Korban Pesach. That's because he's working for somebody. He should eat the Korban Pesach. But the Gemara asks it differently. The Gemara says that we see by Truma that he does not eat Truma of his master the Kohen because he's not owned by him. So too, this Eved Ivri, who's owned by his master, is not a reason why he should not eat the Korban Pesach because he's not owned by him. That doesn't make sense because even if he is owned by him, it's not a reason why he shouldn't be able to eat Korban Pesach. What? It could be one of the million. So Tosha says that. Tosha talks about. Tosha says the answer that Eliezer said that of course he's going to eat truma. He's going to eat Korban Pesach, but the question would be: does he appoint his own? Does he become manui himself, or does he become manui on his master's Korban Pesach? Some technicality, but the Gemara means to say that the pasuk you can't take it literal that Tosha V'Sachir cannot eat truma, cannot eat Korban Pesach, and therefore lafnuye. Therefore, it's extra. Tosha has the kasha that it's not going to say something which is wrong because it says Tosha V'Sachir should not eat, and really he could eat. So Tosha says a pshat that what Chaim Dav said before that the Tosha V'Sachir could be a goy. We can say Tosha V'Sachir is talking about a goy, that a goy cannot eat. A goy who's hired temporarily by a Jew or permanently by a Jew, as long as not Ever Kanani, he may not eat. And Tosha talks about this problem that the pasuk can't say something that's not true just because it wants to say extra gzeira shava. But anyway, the Gemara did find that the Tosha V'Sachir that it says by Korban Pesach is extra. The one by Truma is not extra. The one by not vacant, but the one by Pesach is available to darshan. So you have a strong gzeira shava. But the Gemara says not strong enough. Second line, so the Gemara says not good enough because there's a machlokas how strong Gzeir Shava has to be. Rabbi Lezer, who we're talking about, Rabbi Lezer is the one who's talking. He said this drasha, and the Gemara says not good enough because he himself says that if it's only vacant on one side, he still could ask kashas. The Meidin Meshivin, you could learn the drasha if there's no kashas, but if there is a kasha, you knock it off. So the kasha is that He only found that it's mufna on one side. That's not good enough. It's not strong enough for Gzer Shava. So since there's a kasha that the Korban Pesach, you can't learn from the Korban Pesach the Truma because the Korban Pesach has Pigel, Nosef, Dameh, the reasons why it's more Chomor. So this Gzer Shava is a weak one. We're still going to knock it down. So we still did not explain Rabbi Lezer. The Gemara answers, Chivin de Legufe lo tzorich, Shodi chad al lamed, Shodi chad al lamed, they have like Gzer Shava, Mufna Mishnei Stadim. So this is a fancy footwork to make Gzer Shava stronger. And it says that Toshav and Sachir, both of them are extra. You don't need either one of them. So since both of them are extra, so it's as if one of them would be by its place of Korban Pesach, one of them is transferred by Truma. Means the Shnei Tzdadim are going to be, the two-sided is going to be that it has two extra words by Pesach, and since they're not both not necessary, so one of them is going to be transferred as if it says it by Truma, and now it's going to be empowered. It's an empowered Gzer Shava that does consider Mishnei Tzdadim, even though both of them it says by Pesach. It has two extra words by Pesach. Usually when you have Gzer Shava that's not Mufna, it means one says by Pesach, one says by Truma, both of them are extra. So now it's a strong Gzer Shava. Here we have two words that are extra by Pesach, and we're going to sort of transfer one to Truma, and now it's considered a strong Gzer Shava. That's also good enough.
When it said Mufna mitzad echad lamdin
L'meidin or Meshivin.
I thought that meant that we are going to learn it.
That's only L'meidin. But Meshivin means that you could also knock it down. L'meidin means that you could learn it if there's no kashas, but Meshivin, you could knock it, you could refute it if there's what to refute.
Oh.
Sometimes you say Ein L'meidin. It doesn't get off the ground. It's not a Gzer Shava. Even if there's no kashas, it's not a Gzer Shava. That's Ein L'meidin. L'meidin means you could learn it if there's no kashas. But Meshivin means that if there's a kasha, then you knock it down. The strongest Gzer Shava is going to be the Meidin Dein Meshivin, that you could learn the Gzer Shava, and even if there's a kasha, you can't refute it. It's like ready, steel, bonded. So the Gemara is happy at this point. At this point, the Gemara is happy. Strong Gzer Shava, two sides, and even though they are kashas, it's a good Gzer Shava, and we can transfer the halacha that it says by Pesach that the oral is not allowed to eat the Korban Pesach, also to Truma that the oral is not allowed to eat Truma. So far, we're with the Rabbi Lezer.
We do have. It's Mufna on both sides?
Ki'ilu, as if, means that it's
How
not.
did we do it again?
We do it because there are two extra words by Korban Pesach. There are two words that are extra. If you have one
What
extra,
does that have to do with Truma?
so we have one extra one. What do we do with it?
Oh,
So
use it
we
for Truma.
transfer it to Truma,
I see.
and then you have an extra word on both sides.
Okay.
It's very fancy, right?
Okay.
Okay. Then, yes.
Yeah.
So now the Gemara is accepting this Gzer Shava, and therefore you say the halachas that it says by Pesach also apply to Truma. But that's a bit of a big, that's a lesson. But it's too much because there are many things by Pesach that we don't transfer to Truma. We're just transferring Orel. There are other halachas also. The Gemara has two conscious. One is just to zoom out on the
We
second.
gave the three examples, right?
But those they probably don't apply. There's no nosar. There's no nosar over there. There's no nosar. There's no, and probably it says there's no korban over there also. There's no pigel. The whole thing doesn't apply. The whole thing doesn't. But here, just to zoom out a second, there's going to be two kashas, the pink ones over there. One is going to be that by korban pesach there's a din that an onen is not allowed to eat the korban pesach. Someone whose relative died, so they're not allowed to eat the korban pesach for that day.
Oh.
That's an onen, and you learn that out from Ma'aser Sheni. Over there it says Ma'aser Sheni lo yachalti bo'onim mimenu, and because there's kal v'chomer if Ma'aser Sheni is not allowed to eat if he's an onen, so surely korban is not allowed to eat. And Truma is not like that.
Onen has nothing to do with being tamid.
Right,
He's pure, but he's a onen.
right. His relative died. He didn't touch him. He's not in contact with him,
He
but he's
still
not,
can't eat
and he
fruit.
cannot eat korban. But he could eat truma. And the other kasha is going to be coming up in about 10 lines. Is going to be that okay, we'll wait. There's going to be another kasha. No reason to mix us up. So the Gemara has two kashas on this. If you're making a Gzer Shava, and once you have the Gzer Shava line open, you're going to say whatever applies to Pesach applies to Truma. So therefore, an Orel. That's the whole thing we want. That an Orel that applies to Pesach also applies to Truma. So then other things should also come along. The highway is open. Other things should also come. That's the Gemara's kashas. Two kashas. Here goes the first kasha. Top line of the screen. Ima, yes.
So just point that you brought up is eating a carbon a mitzvah.
Eating korban is a mitzvah. Eating truma is also a mitzvah. Oh yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Eating. I didn't hear the rest of the eating korban is a mitzvah, but only may not.
So I'm saying he's pointing to all the mitzvahs.
That's not the point. The point is not allowed to eat. He's not allowed to eat the korban.
Is
And on it also happens to be that even that I think you're talking about onen in the Lishna D'Rabbana, that it means that till the burial, that he's part of mitzvahs. But that's not the onen we're talking about. The onen of the, it's very interesting, they use the same terminology, but the onen of the pasuk means the day of the death. The day of the death, even if the burial's over already. So it doesn't have to do because he's part of a mitzvah. He says chayv mitzvahs. The onen you're talking about is before the burial. That's lishna d'rabbanan. The rabbinic term of an onen means before the burial. He's part of a mitzvah, even if it's 2 days, 3 days. And the onen we're talking about is the onen of kachim. That's the day of the death. He's not to eat kachim, even if the mace was buried already. So even he's chayv mitzvahs, but he can't eat the korban pesach because he's an onen. So that's the Gemara's kasha, that are you going to transfer this halacha also once you make this gzera shabbos, and then say that whatever applies to pesach applies also to truma, and you're going to also say that an onen cannot eat truma? That's not true. Ima pesach oni nasabo af truma anon nasabo. You're going to say that? That's not true. The pasuk says v'chol zor lo yochal bo. It's a special pasuk that it says by truma. There's a pasuk by truma to tell us that only zar is zaser, but nothing else. It's coming to a miyat. It's saying that we're not going to. There's a pasuk that tells us, it doesn't say openly, but there's some kind of a miyat. The word v'chol zor is going to tell you that I'm only answering you if he's non-kohen. But aninus not. It's coming to say that I guess it's extra pasuk. So it comes to tell us that there's no psul of aninus. But the Gemara says that's not fair. You have one pasuk that says gzer shava, another pasuk that says something is mutter by truma. Doesn't say what. And we made the choice that oral is aser and onen is mutter. Maybe it's opposite. Maybe say that onen is aser ti truma and oral is mutter. How do you know which is which? Aim of Allah Belus. Maybe the pasuk is coming to say that there's no aser and oral. No, the Gemara says no. Except toshav v'sachar, there's gzer shava. No, Omar Roy. So how do you know what to do? You have one yes and one not. They're just saying something yes learn from Pesach and something don't learn from Pesach. And we made the choice that oral we're going to learn, that oral is aser and onen is mutter. Who told you? Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe the onen is aser and the oral is mutter. Mistabra orlas habalei the rebuye shekain mechusa maisa mechusa begufo maisa begufo onish kores yeshna lefnei adibor umila sachar v'avoda ma'keves. So the Mishnah, the Gemara, is lining up the points. Which one is stronger? Which one is more mistaber? Once we have a pasuk that says something you learn from Pesach, something you don't learn from Pesach, we have to use our reasoning now to see which one is more mistaber, which one is more reasonable. So we have a choice. One of them is going to be pasuk, one of them is going to be kosher. Arel and Aonen. Which is more reasonable to think that the Torah meant to say is not allowed to eat truma? So we have the lineup, and the Gemara finds 5 reasons why Arel is worse than Aonen. Lining up Arel against the Aonen. So it says
Gazar is going to exclude something that we learned from Pesach.
And it's going to say that it's mutter by truma. And another question is which one? So we're going to say that oral is aser. Why? First of all, mechusa maisa, that in order to circumcise, he has to do an act. That doesn't happen by itself. He has to onen. He becomes a non-onen just by time alone. Once it passes the day, he's not onen anymore. But in order to become circumcised, he has to do an act. So that's something that's considered he's lacking. He's far from being circumcised. An onen is not as far from becoming a non-onen as a uncircumcised is from becoming circumcised, because there has to be an act that's done. Second one is ma'aseh b'gufo, that has something to do with his body. That the onen is not something physical about his body. He's a relative died, but the person who's uncircumcised is a problem in his body. That's a bigger problem. The third thing is onish koros. So if someone doesn't circumcise, he's chayv koros. If someone is an onen, there's no problem of koros over there. So the fact that it's such a serious avera, such a serious blemish that he's not circumcised, that he's chayv koros for that. So that is a severity. The fourth one is yeshna lefnei adibur, that this mitzvah of Mila even happened before Har Sinai, even before Matan Torah. Mila was given before, but Avraham Avinu. So that's also a severity, a stringency quality that Mila has that Onin doesn't have. And the fifth severity is Mila Sechor V'Avoda Makebes, that not only a person's own circumcision will stop him from eating Korban Pesach, even if he has a son or he has slaves that were not circumcised, also he's not allowed to eat. Not only the son of the Ebed, the owner of the father of the son or the owner of the slave is not allowed to eat if his slave or son is uncircumcised. So that's 5 on the lineup, 5 chumras that oral has that only doesn't apply. It means if someone's son is only, it doesn't affect them at all. So these 5 things apply that a reason. If you have to pick one, we'll say that oral is probably the one that is puzzle. But the Gemara says, I'll show you things on the other side of the list. Adrabba, Anira Savaleder, Buya Shekain, Yeshna B'chol Shah, Venegas Banashim Banashim, Vein Bedel Latakin Asasma. The Gemara finds 3 things that you find the Chumrah that's by owning, that's not by an oral. The first one is Yeshna B'chol Shah. That could happen at any time. That means that an oral, uncircumcised, can only happen one time. If he takes care of that, if he becomes circumcised, he can't become uncircumcised again. That's a one-time thing. But an onen, even though a person was an onen, it could happen again. It means if it's relatives, if the person has many relatives, so it's something which can happen again. Megas manashim manashim. It even applies to women. Women also could be an onen, but a woman can't be uncircumcised. And there's no way to fix up aninus. Means that orel could be rectified. He circumcises, but an onen, there's no way to make himself not an onen within the day. He can become after the day. He's not an onen anymore, but within the day, there's no way to fix it up. So maybe these three reasons are reasons that should say that onen is worse than orel. So the Gemara says easy answer. Hanach lefishin is 5 against 3. You're right. They all make sense, and it's all reasons to be machmir. But the other one is 5. This has 3. These are more. Hanach lefishin. These are more.
Oh, 5 against 3.
5 against 3. So they're all good for us. You're right. 3 reasons that we say onen is more chomer, but we have 5 reasons that oral should be more chomer. That's the reason we say that probably the Torah meant to say that oral is not good. Even without this far that 5 against 3, also I could have another reason why we're not going to say that our onen is puzzle, and that's what we're going to learn out from Pesach. And orel, when matzah is you may
able.
right. Nami lo matzah, you cannot say even without this far that these are more. You also cannot say why. Shavkinan avelus tachsibu gufei de Pesach yalfinan aninus be Pesach the Pesach gufei mimasik amina. The Gemara says you have a choice here which one to learn out from Pesach. There's some psul by Pesach. There are 2 psulim. One is onen, one is orel. Pesach is not orel is not allowed to eat korban Pesach, and the onen is not allowed to eat korban Pesach. And we have a choice which one to learn. One yes, one not. That the pasuk already told us, and we don't know which one. So the psul that oral is not allowed, the uncircumcised is not allowed to eat Pesach. That's open to the pasuk. The pasuk says perish kol arel yochal bo, that uncircumcised may not eat. The halacha that onen may not eat korban Pesach, it doesn't say openly in the pasuk. That's also a drasha. That you learn from Ma'aser Sheni. That by Ma'aser Sheni it says v'achalti v'oni mimenu. That Ma'aser Sheni onen may not eat Ma'aser Sheni. And we learn out a couple homer that surely or Gzera Shavah we learn how to korban Pesach. So that's not reasonable to say that we're going to learn out the thing that it doesn't say openly about korban Pesach. That's what's going to apply to Truma. And the Gzera Shavah is going to bring that which it doesn't say, and the thing which it does say openly that may not eat that you're not going to learn out. So if you have the 2 choices, one is a fresh pasuk by Pesach and one is not a fresh pasuk, we're going to rather learn out the one which is a fresh pasuk, and therefore if these are the 2 choices, we'll say that orel is the one you learn out and onen not.
That's easier.
That's not, you like that?
I like that.
Okay. And this is the first, this answers the first kasha. The first kasha was that if you have a drasha to learn out the Gzera Shavah, so learn out already onen also. The answer is that there's a pasuk that says that it's something is mutter by Truma, that's possible by Pesach. And if the choice, so we use our own reasoning to figure out which one is more mistaber. The Gemara is another kasha now. Kasha number 2. Again, the Gzera Shavah told us that whatever it says by Pesach applies also to Truma. And that's why we learned out that oral is possible. But the kasha is, learn out, ima Pesach, mila sechora ba'avoda ma'keves, af Truma mila sechora ba'avoda ma'keves. We said before, we mentioned this a second ago, that by korban Pesach, not only his own circumcision stops him from eating korban Pesach, even if he has a son who is not circumcised, or an Eved who is not circumcised, also he may not. So by Truma, they learned that out to Truma. Maybe that applies to Truma also. That just like the Kohen is not allowed to eat Truma if he's uncircumcised, maybe if he has a son who's not circumcised, or if he has an Eved who's not circumcised, also the master may not eat Truma. And that's not true. He may eat Truma. So how do you know what to say yes, what to say not? So the answer is, this word bo is emphasized. This is the pasuk that it says by korban Pesach. It's not a pasuk by Truma. This is a pasuk that says by korban Pesach that you may not eat korban Pesach if your slave is uncircumcised. Circumcise him, and then you may eat from it. Umalta also, circumcise the Eved. Umalta also. That's the pasuk. Umalta also. No, 5 words. Malta also az yochal 5 words over here. So
circumcise him, and
then he can eat the korban. Then you may eat the korban Pesach. The owner may not eat the korban Pesach if he has a slave who's not circumcised.
Oh.
But circumcise him, and then you may eat the korban Pesach.
Okay.
That's what they want. So and the fact that it says bo, the word bo is extra. Why does they bo for? Then you may eat the korban Pesach, and its emphasis in korban Pesach. What's the drash to tell us? That korban Pesach is the whole issue that you have to circumcise the Eved in order to be able to eat the korban Pesach. But there's something else that you don't have to circumcise.
Because
By korban Pesach it says that you must circumcise the slave in order to eat it. Why does it say it? That's what we're talking about the
You
Korban
could've
Pesach.
said- Yeah, you could have just said to eat.
To eat. No, we're talking about the Korban Pesach. So the fact that it says it is to say that here by Korban Pesach, there's where the issue is. You have to have
Yeah, but
circumcised.
not truma,
Right,
not
right,
applied to
right.
truma.
By truma, even if your evidence is not circumcised, you also may eat truma. The Gemara doesn't like that. Yachi ema kalora la yochel bo. By the pasuk of oral also it says a bow over there. By Korban Pesach it says uncircumcised may not eat the Korban Pesach. May not eat the Korban Pesach. Bow. So make a big deal out of the bow here also and say by Korban Pesach oral may not eat, and by truma yes. If you're using a fancy bow to say bow Korban Pesach, not something else, so learn also by oral. The whole issue we're talking about that oral is not allowed to eat truma because it says by Korban Pesach. On the contrary, by Korban, what?
We're saying this is a rhetorical question.
Yes, we should learn out that by truma there's no issue about uncircumcised to eat truma. If you're dashing bow over there by malto so as yochel bow, so don't forget about this one. Maybe we should highlight it also. The same way that and make a bow over here also, make a fancy bow. That the bow is also going to be lo yochel bow.
That the truma should not be able to eat.
That you should be able to, because it says an oral minati to Korban Pesach. Emphasize the oral minati to Korban Pesach. Bow, but you should be able to learn out from there. But as far as
the second, that's also on Korban Pesach.
right,
Kol ora lo yachel bo.
but the bow, make the bow. You have to,
Yeah.
that uncircumcised minati to Korban Pesach, and it says Korban Pesach. And Darshan boy in ochel avalachol b'truma, and that's not, and that's why you're saying it's not true. You're saying that oral minati truma. According to your drasha, you should also say that the oral may truma. The same way Darshan bow over there, Darshan bow over here. No, aksiv toshav v'sachvi. That's finished gzera shava. That's a fancy gzera shava to say that whatever applies by Korban Pesach does apply over here. No, so you have one yes and one not. Same pattern as before. You have one drasha says yes to apply Korban Pesach to truma. Another drasha says not to. So how do you know which one? We're being selective and saying oral may not. And but if his slave is an oral, doesn't bother. So who told you? Umar Royce, who told you which one to darshan? So first the Gemara goes again with which one is more severe. If these two problems, a person's own circumcision or his slave's circumcision, which one is more severe? So you'd say, so you're very much on Rava's side. Rava says, but the one before you liked Rava. Here again, Rava's going to say that, but first the Gemara says something else. But first Gemara says, Misnabra Arelis the Gufa have Leila Buya Shekain, Maisa Begufo on the Shkares, two chumras that we have of his own circumcision than his slaves or son's circumcision. One is that it's Begufo, it's his own personal issue, Begufo, and the other one is on the Shkares. If he doesn't circumcise himself, he's Chayiv Kares. Doesn't circumcise his son or a slave, the father's not Chayiv Kares. The son is going to be when he grows up, but it's more severe his own circumcision than his slave or son's circumcision. One is Maisa Begufa, one is Anish Kares. Well, there's no, I'll tell you on the opposite. That there's one thing that applies to the slaves, the severity to the slaves and the sons, that doesn't apply to the father himself. Why is that? That it could happen again and again. A person himself can only be uncircumcised once. Once he circumcised himself, he can't go back again to be uncircumcised. But a person who had a son or a slave that's not circumcised, it could happen again and again. Even if he circumcised him, he could have another son, he could have another slave. So that's a chumrah that you find in the ownership of a zochar or an eved that's not circumcised more than himself. So first thing my answer is Hanach Lafishin. Again, it's 2 against 1. Before we had 5 against 3. Here it's 2 against 1. So also 2 against 1. So we'll say that this is the one that's possible. If you have a choice, which one's going to be possible? We'll say his own circumcision because it has 2 severities more than his slaves and son's circumcision, which only has 1 severity. And Ibai Sema, this is what Leib Yaakov wanted to say. But Lohan, I thought I said it's Rava. It's not Rava. It says Ibai Sema. If you want, I could say Leib Yaakov's far. Even without this, these are more. You can't say that it should be like that. It doesn't make any sense that his own circumcision is not going to be a problem, but his son's circumcision is a problem. Doesn't make sense. So if one of them is yes, one of them is not, surely it's going to be his circumcision is makev and not his son's. And that's the halacha by truma. By truma, we learn out this one halacha that an orel is not allowed to eat truma. Okay, fancy gezerah shava, and then mufta mishneh stodim even. But these other halachas we're not going to learn out. We're not going to learn out. What was the first one? We're not going to learn out that onein is usher, and we're not going to learn out that the circumcision of his slaves or his sons stops him from eating truma. And that's the halacha. So we got some more information, but the drush is staying the same. The halacha is the same, that an oral may not eat truma. The Gemara brings in one line from the bottom. a little extra credit. We have overtime already. Should we go further? We can go a few minutes further.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're 6 down behind. So we'll try to go a little bit slowly, try to catch up. So the Gemara has a problem. If you dash in the bow, you told me already a bow over here. You told me Malto, so os yochal bow, kalora la yochal bow. So we're dashing the bows. So there are a couple of bows that still weren't taken care of. It says kol benechal la yochal bow. It's another bow. Also, the one that says kalora la yochal bow, we just said that not to dash in it, but there's a bow over there. So there are two bows that still have to be explained. It's not the subject. We're off the subject now. We're going on a cruise on a bonus over here because once we say that the bow is darshan, so what are you going to do with these other psukim over here? So I put in parentheses just to show that it's not the main subject. So what are you going to do with kol benecha lo yochal bo? Over there it says benecha. So benecha simply means a goy. A goy is not allowed to eat the korban pesach. But the Gemara Dash is also somebody who's a mummer, that he doesn't do the mitzvahs, he's not observant, also he's not allowed to eat the korban pesach. So, and it says bo. What is that for? The answer is, they called it, he threw away his Judaism. He's not observant. So he says, I'm not allowed to eat the korban pesach. Now, what does say bo for? What does bo come in to say? They could have said, kol b'neicha lo yochal. What is bo?
Lamali bo is the question.
Lamali, right. Lamali, no, the answer is lamali. Lamali. The answer is bo hamoras das poselas. Then hamoras das poselas b'maisa. It's coming to say that this issue about being a benecha or being non-observant doesn't pass somebody from eating ma'aser sheni. By korban pesach, it does, and by ma'aser sheni, it does not. The word hamoras das is censorship. It wasn't the way the Gemara calls it. The word is very a very neutral word. Amoras das means conversion. He converted his religion. That's from the censors. Got into the Gemara when it was printed in Europe. They couldn't write what they really wanted to write. They used to call it a meshumad. He's a meshumad. He was a gishman, and that's what he really said. But they changed it. They made it Amoras das converted his religion. You know that they converted from Judaism to a different religion. So that passes by korban pesach. It doesn't pass by ma'aser sheni.
I'm sorry. What would the real thing be?
Mishumadut.
Which means,
like it says, v'lam mishumadim al tikva. You say v'lam mishumadim probably, right? You don't say v'lam al shinim. You say v'lam al shinim.
no, I say
No, that's it. That's the mishumadim. The people, the ones who, what does the word literally mean? It's not so simple what the word means. Some have an ayin even. Mem shin vav ayin and mishu amad. I'm not sure what the word means, but it's not part of like saying.
Has an eye in it?
Some have an ayin. In the Siddur it doesn't have, right? Mishumadim doesn't have an ayin. But I think that it might have to have an ayin. I don't know what the word means. The word shmad usually means to destroy. Somebody who destroyed himself like that. He left the Judaism. But the censorship put in Amoras das, converting his religion. But anyway, the point is to say that this Ben Echor, who became a non-observant, it passes him from eating the korban pesach. It doesn't pass him from eating ma'aser sheni. So whatever that halacha is, we got a word for the bow. How about kalora lo yochal bow? This bow is also, we didn't take care of it. Like kalora lo yochal bow. We said not truma is not excluded. Truma is not allowed to eat. So what does the bow coming to tell you? Lamali. Bow ain't ochel avol ochelu b'matzah. That even though the orel is not allowed to eat the korban pesach, but he must eat matzah and mora. There's no issa to eat matzah and mora, but you might think he doesn't have to. If he's not doing the pesach, so then let's say Rashi holds that the oral is that it wasn't his fault. So because his brothers died, and medically he's not allowed to have a bris milah, so he can't eat the korban pesach. So maybe there's no mitzvah to eat matzah and mora either. There's no pesach, so no, he does have to eat matzah and mora. The Gemara continues a little bit more, another bonus, another cruise, another parentheses. By korban pesach, it says two psukim, nothing to do with us. But once we're here already, the pasuk says that an uncircumcised may not eat the korban pesach, and someone who's not observant also may not eat the korban pesach. Why do you have to have both psukim? They learn one from the other. No, you need both of them because of having a foreskin is considered disgusting. Why? I don't know. The pasuk says it's a cherpa. It's considered a cherpa. I don't know exactly why. It's something. I'm not sure why it's considered a cherpa, why it's disgusting, I don't know, but that's considered disgusting. And that might be worse than a person who's not observant. So you have to say, non-observant. Because Ben Nechor means that he's not doing, non-observant. How does it come into the words? He estranged himself. He estranged himself from heaven. So you might say that it's worse aspect, the fact that he's nimas, he can eat the korban pesach. Because he's not, his heart is not to heaven. He estranged himself from heaven. You need both psukim. You won't be able to learn one from the other. And one more cruise. That's the end of the Gemara today. That there's also a pasuk there that says, what does Rashi say? The pasuk of Mimenu is, Al tochla mimenu na. Don't eat it rare. The korban pesach is not supposed to be eaten if it's not well roasted. So it says over there mimenu. It's similar to bo when it says it. So here also it says don't eat it. No, rare, raw. So how come I say the word mimenu? So it says this refers us to a Gemara later on the Fayin Dalid. Look over there. Rashi the Gemara says Rabba bar Amar Yitzchak. We'll get there. We'll see what it's for. Extra pasuk which the Gemara says. Look over there on the Fayin Dalid. We'll see what it says. So we had three bonuses at the end of the sugya. Just to remember, the main thing to remember is today, the first words we learned, that Orel is not allowed to eat truma. A non-circumcised Kohen is not allowed to eat truma, even though he's a Kohen, but he has this handicap that he's an Orel, he's not allowed to eat truma. Rashi says even though he's an Onus, he's not allowed to circumcise, he still may not eat truma, but that doesn't stop him from giving his wife or giving his Avadim truma, because he really is a Kohen, as the Gemara said earlier, that is now hurts him, that he has technicality why he can eat truma, but he's not inherently held back from eating truma.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mimenu lamali. And what's the answer?
The Chadirabba Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi and Rabbi Yitzchak told us, so we don't know what that means.
Oh,
So Rashi says, wait till Afayin Dalit, over there we'll find that.
Wait till when?
Afayin Dalit. Rashi here says, "Ayin come on bepirkin Afayin Dalit." That's what it says over there.
I see. Okay.
Okay, Yashikor everybody. Thank you. Thank you. We'll be back in a couple of minutes with Pirkei Avos.